Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Solo ReacTalk. This afternoon, I'm going to be reacting to a video requested by Great Sage Sun. It's 40K, The Emperor of Man, Part 5 or Episode 5. Abandon him in M41, Warhammer 40,000 lore history made on the Luton09 YouTube channel. If you guys want to check out my previous reaction to the other 40K, The Emperor of Man parts 1 through 4. Remember, the playlist card for the Warhammer 40K content created by YouTubers playlist is at the top right here. You'll be able to find them on that playlist. If you want to check out the original video as well as Luton09's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. Yes, it's been around 11, maybe 10 months since I last reacted to the 40K, The Emperor of Man. So yeah, it's good to be back with this playlist of the, so far it's 5, I think, yes, 5 videos. I'm on the 5th one, and yeah, the title, Abandon Him in M41, sounds very interesting. Very interesting. I think I'm going to like this discussion. Abandon him. Abandon the Emperor. I think I'm going to like this one. Alright, let's start. 3, 2, 1, go. The perpetuals could have stopped this long before it ever started, but oh no, you knew what he was like right at the start of it. You went along with it, helped him build the murderers. You acted far too late. John Grammaticus to Erda. Okay, Erda is the mother of the Primox, right? Yeah. Yet again, Luton09 just knows how to capture me with his opening, music to the video. He just knows how to capture me with his opening music to the video that he presents. Really, I'm enjoying this so far.
Emerging from the decaying ashes of mankind's technological zenith came a figure who would subsequently reunite and stabilize and empower humanity across the coming 10,000 years. This new empire would be ruled by the somewhat disconcerting figure known only to the vast majority of humans as the Emperor of Mankind, a man, a being, who preached to his followers and those yet to submit to his will a benevolent tone, but who subjugated any who resisted with often merciless, unrelenting brutality, sometimes even including the complete extermination of tribes, ideologies, religions and worlds who were deemed too difficult to convert. This was the will of the Emperor, and so it would be that humanity prostrated itself to his wishes, many with glassy-eyed rapture, unquestioning loyalty, while others a begrudging acceptance that would steadily soften over generations. Those who would become his most loyal followers were suggestible or eager for a new way forward, readily committed to his teachings, vision and authority. Once again, as his campaign swept through the galaxy, any who questioned this would either be forcibly converted or won over by some grandiose display of power and wisdom. In the Galactic Crusade, those who could not be convinced held no place in the new order. Entire towns, cities, worlds and civilizations were crushed beneath the boots of his gene-crafted transhuman warriors, the Astartes.
Billions of people across the galaxy. Billions. Civilizations, cultures, entire peoples just gone. All for this great plan that the Emperor has been envisioning for all of us.
Later, in one of the most devastating human conflicts, the Horus Heresy, humanity would almost destroy itself once again, and the Emperor would then be set upon the Golden Throne, where he would remain for 10,000 years to the period of the contemporary Imperium. In its aftermath came an exponential rise in various cults of spiritual devotion to the Emperor, eventually consolidating into what would become the Imperial cult. But essentially, all had begun as small groups of followers who believed through his logic and actions that he was more than just a man, more than just a powerful human psyker. And this, stacked against his protestations of being no more than a man, surely proved his divinity. Of course, in this instance, the Emperor did not come out saying, "Alright then, I am the Messiah." No, he continued to deny that he was anything other than a mere ordinary human, no matter how incomprehensible this was. But was it intentional misdirection or not? This remains an open question, but much of it hangs on the consideration around the intentions of the Emperor, something I have already extensively discussed in this series. Was it all part of a master plan? Was it a backup to something that he and Malkador concocted and just went badly awry? Or was it...
Well, considering that he can see into the future, I'm sure it was some sort of backup. You know, if the main plan doesn't work, then this would be the backup plan, where I become the God Emperor of mankind and I sit upon the golden throne, because I'm sure he's also seen this possible future. So yes, definitely, this is just another backup plan, just in case if his main plan doesn't succeed. So in the end, one way or another, he was always going to be our emperor. He was always going to be, having humanity in his clutches one way or another, whether we go into the webway with him or whether we stay in the materium being enthralled by his hegemony over the galaxy. It was a surety that he would be in power one way or another.
Everything the Emperor had always hated about humanity, but seemingly we as a species could not help ourselves in repeating. That is to say, ever gravitating back towards spiritual worship, especially in the darkened horror and the ambiguous ignorance of reality in the far future of M41. With all that in mind, I wanted today to dive into something I've occasionally touched on before, that being, what if we didn't have or choose to follow the Emperor?
Oh, I like this. Let's continue.
Now, admittedly, the concept of choosing to follow the Emperor or not was not really a choice in most situations that have occurred throughout Imperial history. I am still very much open-minded as to exactly what the Emperor is and his intentions. I think you have to be when we consider how unreliable and fragmented the information around him is. I know some people do not think that to be the case, and that in some recent material we have a more definitive view of the Emperor than ever before, which is very reasonable, but as you know, I feel that most of what we know about his early life is still obfuscated or unreliable enough, given that it's told to us through the viewpoints of those who, even if they seem to have retained absolute clarity in their memory from their own time with the Emperor, this is still not enough for me. Because
I mean, that information can be distorted. That information is subject to that person's, view or interpretation, or how that person feels about the Emperor. Whether he or she is loyal to the Emperor or hates the Emperor. So really, hearsay evidence is not very reliable. We would need something that is concrete, something that is far more detailed than someone telling you a bedtime story and saying that this is the truth. That's not enough.
Because one thing we know about human memory is that it's easily damaged, confused, manipulated, just misremembered.
Yeah, exactly.
There are many instances, not least with the Primarchs and their clarity of memory, also the Perpetuals who struggled to recall their lifetimes having occurred over such massive periods of time, even as long as 45,000 years in the case of Ol-P, wondering if it was something that really happened or just a memory of a dream or projected memory from the Emperor, for example. 40K is filled with misdirection and unreliable narrators. And I would throw in here a quote from Dan Abnett himself recently in an interview talking about the next Siege of Terror book, The End and the Death Part 2.
And considering how the Inquisition also meddle into the the history of the Imperium of Man, trying to bolster their position or their ideology within the Inquisition, which does also translate to the greater Imperium of Man. You're not assured of anything in this type of situation, whether it's really true, factual, or is it just a ploy by some inquisitor to, one up his associates, So yeah, really, nothing is assured.
Where he said, quote, "This is a snapshot of what really happened, where the myth grew from," talking about the Emperor. "What the myth becomes is probably more important to Warhammer, as that's what people have come to believe 10,000 years later. But this is a moment of being there at ground zero and seeing these things as they actually play out from numerous perspectives. It almost tells you too many versions." I find it strange, quite honestly, that when one character we have never met before suddenly rattles off a recalled memory about the Emperor or an opinion of him, people are very quick to cling to these things as absolutes, and very little in 40k is rock solid and above scrutiny. Certainly one person's account of having lived alongside the Emperor or some lucid memory from many thousands of years in the past is not what I personally consider solid evidence. My perspective is that individual recollections are interesting, very worthy of furthering a narrative and definitely worth discussion around, but far from being enough to solidify anything as being close to certainty or a definitively closed case. Because this has been ever shown throughout the verse to happen time and time again. Things we thought we knew turn out to be false, or at least not quite as they were told to us.
I mean, currently we are told that female custodians have always existed in, Warhammer 40k. And we had no idea. We had no idea. No shred of information, nothing. I was now told it was just set upon on our laps and said, yes, it's been here this whole time. Surprise, 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 surprise. So yeah, things are not really set in stone. Things are chaotic. Things can be manipulated, or should I say history and information can be manipulated to suit the benefits or the interests of individuals within the Imperium of Man, as a whole. So it's not enough to say that, yes, I've lived for more than 10,000 years and I remember the Emperor. I need more evidence than that. I need more than your hearsay. Yeah.
Which has often connected two things in my mind when it comes to 40k. The accepted version that the Emperor was the only way, and the more uncomfortable searching questions of why. I've raked over these questions before that lie at the heart of the intentions of the Emperor. Questions like, if he was so powerful, why did he not better use this to ensure humanity avoiding destruction during the Golden Age? If STCs are so powerful, why did the Emperor not retain these more securely? Or if they are so powerful, why did humanity collapse so severely and more planets didn't survive with zenith levels of technology, able to, for example, resist the Emperor's crusade?
I have also said, something very similar to what Luton 09 is stating here. If the Emperor can see into the future and he knows what's going to happen to this golden age of mankind, why did he not prepare even more diligently for it, instead of just making a bunker under the Himalayan mountains and think that that's enough, that I'm going to survive through this, I'm going to make the Imperium of Man, with nothing really, just some few scientists and some genetic test tube babies and experimenting on other human beings to make them into Thunder Warriors. That's not enough when there was so much technology available in the golden age of mankind, in the golden age of technology, where we had STCs, where we had advanced weaponry systems, advanced space travel, in terms of vessels, where we had everything at our feet, technologically wise. And he did not acquire all of that information. He did not acquire that infrastructure. He doesn't have a planet that he has cached away somewhere in the galaxy where he can just store all that stuff there until he needs it. He hasn't done anything like that. And at our zenith of technology, why did he not avail himself as as a powerful psyker that could lead humanity to an even far more brighter future with our technological might and our psyker development. Why did he not reveal himself to us back then? Why now, when we are at our knees, when we are looking for hope, when we are looking for a hero, when we are looking for safety, does he then decide, I'm going to reveal myself to you? He reveals himself to us at our weakest point and not when we are at our strongest point. What does that tell you right there? No.
If he has such foresight, along with Malkador together, why did they not better prepare? Why was the Crusade such a rush to the point that the Emperor willfully damaged the genetics of the Astartes, regarding them seemingly as little more than his next tools to get to the next stage of his grand plan?
Exactly. Because if this notion of he didn't have enough time is something to be believed in, why did he not start all the way back in the golden age of technology? Why did he not start then? Why now, when he's literally late? He's on the last few seconds of completing this mission, this objective. He had so much time.
So it's something that I've seen many people consider for obvious reasons. Couldn't humanity ever find another way? Isn't this what we are best at? Or do we just accept that our fate is tied to this one single individual just because they said so?
That's exactly what I've been saying. That is exactly what I've been saying. That our dependence on this lich on that throne is literally making us stagnant. We need to break free of it. There's going to be chaos, no doubt. There's going to be calamity to the likes of which we haven't seen since the golden age of technology. But we need to break free of him and his hegemony and his imperium. We need to break free of it. Humanity needs to be reformed again into something else. And I think it's possible. I believe it's possible. I don't believe that our destinies, our fate of trillions of human beings across the galaxy is tied up with this man on that throne. It can't be that way. We are just too resourceful, too adaptable, too stubborn to be controlled by one man on that throne and his entire imperium of man. I believe humanity can survive this. We can survive whatever comes our way.
That doesn't seem very human. There are many in the galaxy who claim certain truths or prophecies which turn out to be not as they imagined. Groups like the Cabal who believe that they knew what had to be done, but turn out to be sort of true, but not really. Why is it any different with the Emperor? Just because he said so, or believed that humanity, for example, couldn't handle the knowledge of the existence of chaos? Do we accept that without question? Why is Olp's opinion that they should have destroyed the Enuncia on Earth in the ancient times when he was standing alongside the Emperor less valid than the Emperor's opinion that he wanted to retain it? Maybe had the Primarchs been primed with information, they could have been more guarded. Maybe the heresy would not have occurred, is a very common discussion point. What was the fate of the two Scoured legions? That they became corrupted early on during the Crusades and so had to be destroyed? Why do no other Primarchs or legions really expressly mention or ever question about this? Were their memories manipulated? I mean, this is in fact the curious.
I'm sure maybe their memories were manipulated by the Emperor, because we've seen that happen with Horus when he betrayed the Emperor and he was searching for power that could kill a god, essentially. His father, the Emperor, and how he went to the planet, I think it was called Molech, right? And he was trying to recollect his past memories of what he did on this planet with his father, with Sanguinius, I think, as well as Jagatai Khan. And the Emperor erased their minds of the events on that planet. So it is possible, and I think the Emperor did erase their minds of the two legions that were expunged. Yeah.
Thing about 40k in the lore, for as often as people make the argument that the Emperor should have told his Primarchs about the dangers of chaos, In a way, it really wasn't necessary. In fact, the Emperor even explains this somewhat in Master of Mankind when he describes how the danger of the primordial annihilator is very well known to humanity already. Why do we have Geller fields for travel through the warp, he says? Why do navigators know the dangers of this? He explains how it would be little different if he labelled the beings in the warp as demons. But I think for me this is again somewhat of an oversimplification. It also feels very much like the Emperor misdirecting, because sure, the Primarchs, you could argue, should have been able to piece things together, except very clearly not, and the Emperor even is sort of aware that they are not aware of this, because Magnus. So maybe if it didn't make that much difference either way, which is what he seems to imply, maybe it would have just been better to spell it out. Then we can think about, what did Guilliman see when he visited with the Emperor 10,000 years after he was interred on the Golden Throne? Why was he so disturbed upon exiting the throne room? Was the Emperor just a destroyed husk that was unrecognisable and this very pained Guilliman? Or was it that the extreme burden upon the Emperor meant he were unable to prevent Guilliman from seeing his true self, something the Emperor always seems to have been very unhappy about anyone being able to see? As in Deliverance Lost, for example, when Korax asks the Emperor, "Is this your true face?" To which the Emperor replies, "I have no such thing. I have worn 1,000,000 faces over the millennia, according to need or whim." I remember this one, says Korax, dimly recalling a dream he had glimpsed when overcome by wounds in a crashing Thunderhawk. "This was how you appeared to me when I was born in my pod." "Yes, it is strange that you should remember that," said the Emperor, and his expression becomes sterner. And then he changes the subject. Now you may think stern, that's not exactly a blind rage or remonstration, true enough, but the Emperor is not one for displaying displeasure very openly. He always presents a loving, caring tone to his Primarchs for the most part, so
it's an act. It's all an act. He has a mask on, like Horus. I'm sure that's where he learned it from. He learned it from the Emperor. Like Horus, the Emperor has a mask. One that he shows to humans, one he shows to Primarchs, one he shows to Astartes. And then the true self, we don't really see that part of him. It's very rare to see it, And if you're one of those people who are lucky enough to see it, you might actually have the shock of your life. That this person who calls himself the Emperor of Mankind, it's not a human being. It's something else. Something that's, I would dare say, is like a curse that's now been, put on our necks. We can't break free of it. He's not human. He's a mistake.
An expression likely denotes considerable irritation on behalf of the Emperor, that he potentially let his guard down for that brief moment when he thought no one was around. He's probably more annoyed with himself than anything else, and he didn't imagine that a gestating Primarch in a pod would recall that memory. The bigger question, of course, is, why would the Emperor care? A point of pride, or something more vague and fundamentally troubling?
Remember, for his great plans to work, he needs people to cooperate with him, or forcibly cooperate with him. For his plans to work, he needs to be seen in a particular light that would further his political objectives and his military objectives. He doesn't want his sons to hate him from the get-go. He wants majority of his sons to love him. He wants majority of his sons to be in this illusion, thinking that the Emperor loves them. When in actual fact the Emperor does not love them. He sees them as tools, as weapons to be used on the battlefield, and once the mission or objective is completed, he will cast them aside. So he needs to keep up these appearances. He needs to keep himself, seen as this person who has this great vision for humanity, and he loves humanity, and he loves his sons. And we know for a fact that there's nothing like that in this man. It's imitation.
The point I'm coming to here is, of course, one that we already know, that it is very difficult to trust even the details we think we know when it comes to 40k. Like I said earlier, just how powerful are STCs. We know what they are told to be capable of, and we know some instances where we've seen what they're capable of. But if that were the case, as I've explained before, should colonists have been able to very easily endure anything, including the Age of Strife? Theoretically, it would seem so, and some did of course, but I think it leans towards suggesting that whilst STCs were very powerful, it may well be, for example, that when humanity still had also AI and potentially other advanced forms of artificial human life, they were considerably more effective then, which leads to other questions like, can AI in fact still be used safely? And it's just scaremongering. Is this part of the Emperor's grand plan to minimize the use of AI to make other things like psychers and so forth necessary? This is something that is always taken as a given, that AI are fundamentally bad, that they can be potentially corrupted by chaos, and this is what caused the downfall of humanity.
I think, in terms of artificial intelligence, it will be far more difficult for the Emperor to control machines than it would be to control human beings. Because he's such a powerful psyker, he can manipulate our minds and make us think whatever he wants. You know, he can come down a landing craft and present himself in this golden aura of just beauty and light and warmth, and you know, we would see him as a god. The machines won't see that. They will actually see what the Emperor really looks like, and they will be able to analyze and just put it down into data, hard data that they can interpret and use when they need to. But us as human beings who are fueled by our emotions and where we are clouded by our own frailties as biological creatures, he can easily manipulate us. So if the machines had agency, or should I say, if artificial intelligence had agency, had their own republics or empires, it would be a very difficult situation for the Emperor to manipulate them, to use them for his grand master plan for humanity. It would be very difficult. And maybe that's also one of the reasons why stamping out artificial intelligence was just further entrenched within the Imperium of Man. Not only because of what happened during the Dark Age of technology, with the what do they call them again? The Iron Men rebelling against humanity. Not just because of that, but because of the fact that it would be far more difficult for the Emperor right now to control them. I think, yeah. If they had empires, if they had kingdoms, or a conglomeration of machine intelligences, it would be very difficult for the Emperor to take control and direct them to whatever he sees fit. Yeah. So he needs humans, not machines, really.
But even that is a very fragmented history, and I'll probably talk about this again later on, because nobody really knows what happened. No one can say for sure that the Emperor never had a hand in what played out during that time either.
And considering that the Emperor sees us like flowers, if I can say that. I've been told, the Emperor sees us as flowers and he's the gardener and tending to his flowers. He doesn't really love us in the individual sense. He loves us as the grander scheme of things, I'm sure maybe he played a hand in the Dark Age of technology where the machines rebelled against us. All in an effort for his Grandmaster plan to come into fruition. It's possible. It's possible. I mean, if the Great Crusade can happen, where billions of people are being killed, where civilizations, whole planets turn to ash, why should it not be possible that the Emperor also played a hand in our first downfall during the Dark Age of technology? It's possible.
Don't know, so we just can't say either way. We see time and again that ancient AI and machine spirits are far more powerful than humanity in M41, and often when weaponry from the Dark Age of technology is deployed, it's only able to do so with the use of ancient AI systems, which altogether leads to a point of thinking, how much truth was there in all the Emperor laid out before those who were closest to him? It all comes down to perspective. For the Emperor, many of the things that it is considered he didn't do from his perspective, already existed, like knowledge of the warp and its dangers. But it begs the question, would the doom of humanity be a certainty without the Emperor? Or would it survive, just not in his vision for it? Did humanity...
Definitely we would survive, but not in his image. Not in his vision of how he'd want humanity to survive. Remember, this man is a control freak. He wants everything his way. If it's not his way, you die. And that type of fear-mongering has also been entrenched in many people, where they think that the Emperor is the only person who can save us. When I say humanity can save itself, we've always done that before. Why is it different now? Why should it be different now? Because this Emperor is here. Why should it be different? We have the capability of saving ourselves. Stop depending on one person to be that answer to all your problems. Because even in that notion of making your Messiah your Savior, believing that he has all the answers, you are literally creating a religion. Right there, you've created the religion where you're depending on one man to be the answer to all your problems. And this is the very thing that the Emperor says he claims that he's against. He's against religions. He's against gods. He's against any form of spirits or demons or whatever else that humanity might conjure up as a belief system. But the fact of the matter is, the fact that he exists and his Imperium of Man exists, and the way people venerate him and see him as the Messiah, as the answer to all of our problems, it's a religion being created right there. Hey. So I say we have the capability to survive. We don't need the Emperor. We never did. We never did.
Have to be forcibly subjugated during the unification and crusade. What if the Mechanicus, for example, had instead become the ultimate authority? That's not really reality I want to think about, but nonetheless. Perhaps most of all, what if some colonies that survived the age of strife and collapse of the Golden Age had an opportunity to grow and strengthen, perhaps with the use of AI systems to empower themselves to a level as seen during the Dark Age of technology once again?
And maybe some of those empires would have a far better understanding of psyche evolution in mankind. Where they would be able to incorporate our technological innovation and mindset with our psyche evolving species of our kind, and merging it together, making a psyche techno species of mankind, something new, something different. Instead, we're here in this mess.
These are the questions that do very often keep me musing late into the night and the morning. Now, just before we get deeper in, I thought a relevant aside to note, and you can stop hyperventilating, I'm not going to speak about canonicity and how it's not a thing in 40k again, although if I were, it would actually fit very well right here, but no. What I want to speak to is how, generally speaking, the lore as it comes to us mostly from the perspective of humanity, and by humanity we should read Imperium, is the default for 40k. And often even Xenos material is slanted or interconnected with some human issues. And yes, this was a small side note that has spiraled into a whole section. It's a regular problem for me. From an outside perspective, and I think especially for those newly entering the 40k verse, who were perhaps wanting to be more objective or gain an overall picture, this imperial slant on things is sometimes also not very obvious and other times very wildly obvious, but either way it can be problematic and it can be confusing. And not least because the Imperium has become such a nightmarish dystopian human soul grinder fed on a daily diet of authorized propaganda that things have reached really a point of absurdity, which is of course one of the beautiful things about 40k, its satirical take on the absurdity of ideological extremes. Also, just a small aside, while so many people often get into this whole topic about the satire of 40k. There are definitely aspects of 40k that are very satirical, and there are definitely aspects of it that are more serious. At different times throughout the history of 40k as a narrative verse, those things have either come forward more strongly or less, but it is definitely an aspect of it. So anyway, by M41, the Imperium has become so effective at the obfuscation of the truth of things that this can quite regularly become actually counterproductive for them, even destabilizing to the regular operation of the Imperium. Internal wars and conflicts have begun because of this. Throughout history there are many examples of this as well, especially during totalitarian regimes where people in positions of authority were perhaps too scared to tell the truth or were actively crushed by those above them, concerned about how any new information could reflect on them. And ultimately, the point is incorrect information leading to inefficiency or poor decisions which would later have severe consequences elsewhere. Or, to use another example, the part in Futurama, Fear of Bot Planet, where the robots have been fear-mongering about humans for so long that the unelected council of robot elders forget if humans can actually breathe fire, or they just made it up.
And I'll breathe fire on you!
Can they really breathe fire, or did we make that up?
Gee, I can't remember anymore.
There are plenty of obviously far better, more serious examples adjacent to 40k and its Imperium, of course, the most obvious being something like 1984, which is often relatively comparable to, say, citizens of Imperial Hive cities. In 1984 you have citizens who are similarly devolved in the state of their learning, where they have lost the ability not only to critique or question the information given, but even to articulate ideas that are contrary to the established order of things, because all information is being controlled and fed from the ruling totalitarian state.
I think I need to watch that movie. It is a movie, right? 1984? Yeah, I think I might need to watch that movie. Not might, I will. Just need to look for it.
Which I think, even if not a perfect comparison, still remains quite applicable to the Imperium. Not to mention the many other comparisons that could be made along the lines of its commentary about nationalism and obsessive sense of loyalty to individuals, the rewriting of history to suit the preferences of the state, censorship, surveillance, the persecution of those who do not conform, and most obviously the concept of perpetual war as a means of control. But most interestingly, within its two languages of High and Low Gothic, Imperial Gothic. It's this concept of societal language deterioration and division between workers and the elite, either naturally or forcibly. In 1984, the citizenry used so-called Newspeak, the controlled language of simplified grammar and restricted vocabulary. And this is by design intended to limit the individual's ability to think critically or articulate subversive concepts, even to express personal identity and free will. Which is of course the most interesting concept within that story, the idea of a state reaching a point of such total control of the populace that language has become oppressively simplified that it can even inhibit their ability to express free thought, let alone insurgent activities against authority. And
I can see that being maintained if the authority itself is maintained. You know, the totalitarian authority is maintained, then yes, you know, making humans docile in this particular way is possible, almost indefinitely, if the authority is maintained. But if the authority is gone, if it's been destroyed by some sort of way or manner, you know, over time, humans would then adapt and regain that type of ability to make new words that would describe new situations or you know, new things, or, you know, to represent themselves or represent their community or represent the entire planet in any form of shape. You know, new words would be created. So I would say that it is possible that this type of situation can be enacted. The thing is, for how long can it be maintained? You know, how far would that reach be for it to continue this way for humanity? Yeah.
Of course, a significant amount of quotes I would like to interject here, but I will resist the temptation because it will just go off on an even wilder tangent. But similarly to the Imperium, I've often seen the same questions arise about, could such a reality ever truly happen, given the fact that humans are not just mindless drones. And in saying this though, it always seems to be more of a question of, at what point will humans be triggered into resistance, than if it could happen at all. And there are a huge variety of modifiers there, and we see this even now in the current times. Very often, it's only when things become so very extreme that people feel they have nothing to lose, but that even then this can be quite the sliding scale, especially depending on the culture or what information people have available to them. The shape of their reality is being dictated by the authority, and similarly in 1984 in the Imperium, citizens generally speaking only know the reality being told to them by the authorities. Across many civilizations and nations in human history, we can see how the state of control and oppression on a populace may be seen as extreme externally, but internally, the populace were either seemingly content with it or more likely unable to realistically do much about it no matter how unhappy they were, or just unwilling to risk everything.
Like what we're seeing right now currently with North Korea, if I can say that, if that's an example I can put out there, North Korea. But yeah, just give them time. Something might happen, someone might stand up and do something. It can happen. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. External factors, China, South Korea, probably also Japan and America, all those types of countries can influence what happens in North Korea. Or the North Koreans themselves will do something that would literally turn their entire authority upside down. Just give it time. Something can happen.
Until it reached an extreme point of personal collapse or broader conditions that would precipitate a societal structural implosion. And I think these kind of concepts are important to consider and understand when we're thinking in 40k about why more worlds do not rebel against the authority of the Imperium and its suffocating brutality. Unless, for example, it's a top-down rebellion led against the Imperium, where we see a governor or military officials deciding to declare independence, as with, say, Krieg or Rofanon.
If it was a bottom-up rebellion, I would probably see that as a gene stealer cult type of situation, or I would see it as chaos if it's from the bottom up. That's how I would first see it before I see it as a genuine, rebellion against the state. Yeah, I don't know, because this is Warhammer 40k. That's how I'm thinking about it. People just don't rise up. They just don't do that. if it's from the bottom up, I'm telling you, it's either gene stealer cult or it's chaos. And if it's from the top to the bottom, then definitely I would say maybe yes, it is a genuine rebellion against the Imperium of Man. Yeah, that's just how I picture 40k, Warhammer 40k.
Rebellions are far more easily crushed by security forces in the Imperium, and hive cities so big and self-contained that entire sectors could be destroyed without others really understanding what's happening. But returning to this point about the language, in 40k we have High and Low Gothic, Imperial Gothic, and the latter exists as this everyday language used by civilized worlds within the Imperium. But unlike 1984, this is not necessarily a repressive, limited language by design. Its citizens are still very evidently capable of rising up against the status quo, even if this has limited, if any, real success. The point is, they're capable of understanding the concept of inequality and a sense of independent thought. So much so this is why you see cults and bizarre, problematic things occurring on hive cities. Human language across the galaxy of M41 can actually be quite confusing, as we might well imagine, when you have so many planets spread all throughout the galaxy who emerged out of ancient human colonies who wanted to develop and establish their own cultural identities, then later these rose or devolved into feudal, feral and industrial worlds that were isolated for millennia. Some may have developed their own languages derived from Gothic or even ancient Earth tongues which remained adjacent to the core primary spoken language. This was said to have been common in the dark age of technology, where colonists wished to develop their own identities and may have revived ancient languages to help in defining themselves. It's worth noting that generally speaking, human language tends to exist to serve a need, and it's often very difficult to maintain a language that has failed to serve a purpose. Of course, the definition of serving a purpose is quite a broad and subjective thing. Many would consider the cultural importance of maintaining a language rising above practical considerations. Others may see it the opposite way. Within the Imperium, High Gothic is a much older and more sacred language. It's used in the naming of devices, departments, the general structure of the Imperium. It's also seen to be used in technical rituals and when ancient works are being recorded. And this was the advanced language said to have been developed during the Dark Age of technology. High Gothic is used really only by the elite in the period of M41 and was likely the primary spoken language in the ancient time of humanity's golden age, although why this language came to be so is never really described to us. And there's a lot more to be said about this, both in comparative commentary and speculation, but really, when it comes to the languages of the Imperium and humanity's past, the key point here is that High Gothic remains largely unintelligible for most Imperial citizens, and it remains the language of important adepts, elite nobles, navigators, rogue traders, mechanicus, high-ranking Imperials, and of course, members of the Inquisition. Very obviously, the mechanicus speak in their own machine language as well. Now, in doing so, this all creates that separation of the elite and the common, those with power and those without, or more bluntly, those who must be controlled. Adjacent, it's interesting how these two languages are collectively known as Imperial Gothic, which is of course a not very subtle reference to actual Imperial Gothic, a term applied most often to late 19th century fiction which adapts elements from Gothic novels, such as a forbidding, gloomy atmosphere, brutal, tyrannical figures, spectacular forms of violence or punishment, and the presence of the occult and the supernatural, which interestingly enough I was actually speaking about this morning in regard to The King in Yellow, the book, not the figure in 40K. Interesting though to have that reference of Imperial Gothic apply to the languages and separation that exists within the Imperium. It's very unlikely to be by accident. Anyway, the point overall is that something we do know about the Imperium is that we can barely trust much of anything. Their blurring and obscuring of history is so widespread and commonplace that it's really difficult to trust anything on record. So much so that now this is actually something they have been attempting to repair and mitigate over time, even more so with the return of Lord Commander Guilliman. But even then, they have only really had partial success. Such are the established forces working within the Imperium, such as the very specific elements of the Inquisition, whose entire role is to just continually obfuscate, deceive, and muddy the waters. As I noted earlier, there remain many enduring questions about the Emperor. What is he? His origins, his ultimate intentions? Was he running some master plan to become a god, or was he just winging it all the way and hoping that somehow everything would work out? Or something in between? I think
he definitely was not winging it to see, going with the flow to get to his end result. He definitely was not doing that. He was using his future sight abilities 100% every single day until that last day when he fought against Horus. He's been using his powers. He's addicted to it. There's no self-control, no discipline. He was consumed by it, just like Conrad Kurz was consumed by his ability to see into the future. The Emperor was in that same situation.
Like I said in episode 4 of The Emperor, was he just basically going along with a singular plan and papering over the cracks where he could? So we have questions about, did the Emperor even originate from the ancient times in humanity, or was this yet more misdirection through the manipulation of others, and to what end? Unclear. But to be clear, there's no evidence at all that really points to this, it's just speculation. There's nothing which necessarily points to the fact that he originated just from the Dark Age of technology. But it's always strange to me how the Dark Age of technology and its collapse has so little information and records kept. Was this very intentional? Did the Emperor have a hand in this? Or was it just such a catastrophic civilization collapse that truly little, if anything, remained during the destructive grinding gauntlet of the Age of Strife?
If I go along with what I've said before, that the Emperor might have played a hand in the downfall of humanity during the Dark Age of technology, then I can also see this as a possibility where the Emperor would further, solidify a far more weaker humanity by erasing as much of our history as possible. You know, especially because Earth or Terra was so important back then, and it had a vast amount of information, vast amounts of knowledge, culture, and technology, and you know, all of our collective knowledge was probably kept in the solar system during those times of the golden age of technology. He made sure that such information would to be erased, almost 80 to 90% of it erased, destroyed, to make sure that humanity can't rise up from this entire calamity and return back to the golden age of technology. He has to make sure that humanity is weak, will become docile to his suggestions and to his hegemony and imperium of man, so that his grand master plan can come into fruition. He can't have an empire that will oppose his ascendancy to become the emperor of mankind on Earth or wherever else in the galaxy. So I can see this as a possibility as well, where not only did the emperor play a hand in the calamities of the dark age of technology, but he also played a hand in making sure that humanity will never be able to gain the knowledge and technology that we had during the golden age of technology. That would be lost to us, and the only person who would be close enough to understand or to replicate that technology is the emperor, and of course the Mechanicus of Mars, which, you know, since he can see into the future, I'm also suggesting that he played a hand in creating the Mechanicus or the Mechanicum of Mars before it was called the Mechanicus. He could have also played a hand in that too. This man could have, you know, spread a spider web of misdirection, of sabotage, of controlling humanity throughout the entire galaxy, using his ability to see into the future. He might have done that, making sure that after the age of strife, humanity would be, you know, ripe for the taking under his authority. It's possible. It's possible.
But these kind of what-ifs can really be as long as you want them to. A favourite one would be something along the lines of, as I said, is the Emperor a golden man from the Dark Age of technology, who was, by design, created as an ultimate being? Was he the only golden man ever created? Could he be something like an ultimate AI, I've seen people suggest? Or whatever he is, his entire being was created to safeguard humanity in that time, and that's why he was pushing toward this safety of entering the webway and attempting to defeat chaos by any means, seemingly with little regard for the collateral human damage along the way. It's all a pretty out there concept, but really...
Yeah, kind of way out there. I mean, I don't know if humans created organically based artificial intelligence, you know, synthetic organic based artificial intelligence with psycho powers. Yeah, I don't know, but it's possible. Anything is possible. let me not cancel that out. You know, let me keep myself open to any form of scenario in Warhammer 40K.
Really, anything is possible in the verse of 40k. There's always this sense that the Emperor knew what he was doing from his foresight, power and confidence, and so it helps give weight to this perspective that the Emperor is infallible. Except this is at the very least an open question. His fallibility largely hinges on how you view or interpret the end of the heresy, the complex issues that Malcador has raised around how much he intended for the war among the Space Marines themselves to occur. There's still much to learn there, of course, and we haven't completed really the full narrative from the Siege of Terra. While there are many, one of the biggest unanswered questions remains, why was he so desperate to get things done quickly? And that can be very simple or more complex. But this one fact is something that forces a considerable amount of serious problems to occur in the stability of humanity's reunification during the Crusade, not least the damage to the Astartes, but also the damage caused to human civilizations, which could have been avoided, including potentially valuable tech they had held and maintained since the Dark Age of technology. And you see this being discussed right in the beginning of the Heresy series, where Horus is trying his best not to cause massive damage to some of the more advanced civilizations they encounter, but some of his core Astartes that are around him are telling him, the hell with this, Horus, let's just smash them and move on. It's often explained away that the Emperor was just in a rush to complete his goals because of whatever ticking clock he had started from his deal with the beings in the warp. But this pretty vague and simplistic explanation has always really bothered me for the longest time, because it surely cannot be as simple as a furious impatience to push humanity forward to a point where it cannot destroy itself. And he appears to start down this road very early on when he is speaking with perpetuals in humanity's ancient past. He has this vision of what he, as one of the most powerful perpetuals, needs to do to make things happen, and is hell-bent on making this occur by any means necessary. Except, it somehow takes him thousands of years before he even really begins to do much of anything. Why? I guess either because he has a vision of the end point for humanity without him, or that he simply wants to force his will and evolve humanity more quickly, both of which require him to bide his time and wait until things are ready before he can move forward. But this reason has again always troubled me. It feels like the Emperor did not want to attempt to convince humanity during its golden age, when they were supposedly at their most rational, how
Exactly. I have been saying this as well. I said it right now, just a few minutes ago as well, during the video, that the Emperor could have revealed himself to us during the golden age of technology. He could have led us to this grand future, this grand, peace for humanity during the golden age of technology, when we had all the knowledge, when we had all the power. But instead, he does it when we are at our weakest point, when we are on our knees. That's when he comes to us like a Messiah and says he has the answers to our problems, that he will guide us to this future. Why? Why do that now? Why didn't you do it before? It would have been much more easier for him during the golden age of technology.
to avoid catastrophe. Now perhaps that's because again we come back to dangerous topics like time and so on. Maybe the possibility of saving humanity during the Golden Age and its collapse were not in play. On the other hand, maybe the Emperor knew that he could not exert his will in the same way during this height of human technological evolution as he could when it had collapsed to a point of barely being able to stay functional, having regressed to some cyberpunk apocalypse where
Now that we've ascertained why he would only try to save us after the calamity of the golden age of technology, that he would only save us when we are at our weakest point. Why is that? Why is that? Why does he want us when we are at our weakest point? Why? We're far more easier to manipulate. We're far more easier to control. And that is why I'm continuously say that this man does not love us as humanity as a whole. He does not love us. We are things, we are toys, we are tools. To what end, I don't know exactly. That I'm not entirely sure of. Because even when we're in the webway, our torment, our suffering under the heel of this entity is still going to continue. It's still going to continue. He does not love us.
Whereby he would far more readily be able to convince others to follow him on an immense crusade to reunite the galaxy, under his banner of course, and destroy those who did not share his vision. But it's always struck me that this decision here is the critical thing, because either the Emperor was waiting for a window of opportunity when he could seize power over all humanity, or he genuinely was there to save it in its darkest hour. So this idea of him being humanity's saviour is a strange one to me, because he apparently had attempted to meddle in human history in the past and failed. So it raises again the prospect, did he set somehow in motion the events of the Dark Age of Technology collapse, to ensure humanity would be sufficiently weakened that he could finally seize control of it fully? And if so, was this truly to save humanity, or was it to serve the Emperor, empowering him into a position whereby he could become a true eternal warp god?
Exactly. Like I just stated right now. He wants He wants us at our weakest point so that he can manipulate us, that he can control us, he can use us as he sees fit. And even if his grandmaster plan of sending us into the webway succeeded, our suffering, our torment under this man's rule is not going to end. He's going to be with us forever, this lich. And he is going to become whatever he wants, maybe a god or some sort of entity that just engorges on human psyche energy, like the chaos gods. Essentially, he will become part of the pantheon of chaos gods. That's what I see.
The god of humanity, its ultimate protector. And there are so many individual threads to
our protector or our farmer. He will be the farmer while we are the cattle. He'll be tending to the herd of cattle in his farm. That's what we're going to be in the webway, where he keeps us on his farm. He makes sure that we are fed antibiotics. He makes sure that we are kept in a pen. He makes sure that we're fed with hay or with grass or whatever it may be, He makes sure that his cattle are fine, and in return his cattle give him psyche energy so that he becomes stronger, that he sustains himself, and that he joins the chaos gods as one of the gods in the pantheon of chaos.
Continually pull at when it comes to the Emperor. Did he intend for the Space Marines to collapse into this massive war of self-destruction at the end of the Crusade, whereby the victors would have proved themselves strong enough to join him for eternity? Or did he simply want them to thin out their own numbers so that it was then going to be more practical for he and the Custodes to destroy them as they had done with the Thunder Warriors? That idea for me is also complicated by the fact that after the war in the Webway, the Custodes were said to have only been about 1,000 strong. But even if they were at their supposed 10,000 default strength, the perfect killing machines for Astartes, it's hard to imagine them being able to take on hundreds of thousands of Space Marines and all their material hardware. But
I think the Emperor had a backup plan for that as well. He knows he's not just going to make Astartes super weapons without a kill switch. That's stupid. Even for him, he would not do something like that without a contingency plan should it fail. I'm sure the Emperor had a kill switch for the Astartes. It can either be like a biological weapon, or it can be some sort of psyche energy that he would be able to produce that would kill the Space Marines or destroy the gene seeds within the Space Marines. Something. I'm sure he had a plan. Because he has 10,000 Custodes versus hundreds of thousands of Astartes. I don't think they would make it. But definitely, those Primarchs that are supremely loyal to the Emperor with their legions, they would help the Emperor in clearing out those that are against him or those that are against the Imperium of Man and the completion of the plan. Because there are some Primarchs that also did not like humanity taking over the Imperium of Man once the Great Crusade was over. They were against that. And I'm sure they would try to rebel against the Emperor. But by then it would be too late. Because the Emperor would have solidified his authority. He would have shored up his defenses on Terra. And whatever they would try against him, it would not be enough. So definitely, backup plan for a backup plan for a backup plan in terms of dealing with the Astartes. Just like the Thunder Warriors, there are tools that must be thrown out once their purpose is done.
I suppose that, arguably combined with the Emperor himself, maybe it somehow would have been possible. Who knows? The many questions though about the Emperor and his intentions make the entire picture endlessly complex, especially in regard to his ultimate intentions, which is why it's such an enduring and interesting topic to consider. There are so many references to servants of the Emperor, Custodes, Sisters of Silence, human administrators, bureaucrats, even ordinary humans who are fully on board with the Emperor, his vision, his complete confidence and powerful presence. Yet very often, at a specific moment, they suddenly feel a sting of doubt. This is a recurring event in many 40k novels, where these individual humans hear that small voice in the mind of all that says, wait, is this right? One of my favourites that I've mentioned, of course, is the Sisters of Silence loading the Psychers into the Golden Throne pods for the first time and realising in her horror that they will be murdering millions, if not billions of human Psychers forevermore. She even refers to them as being innocent, some sense of morality which the Emperor seems totally devoid of. But somehow she's even more confused that everyone else is just fine with this, because it's all in...
No, they're not fine with this. Even them, they know it in their minds that no, this is something wrong. This is something wrong. But because the bureaucracy, the institution, the Imperium of Man is so overbearing on them that they cannot expose themselves. They cannot think differently because they don't know what you're thinking. The person next to you doesn't know that you're thinking the same way, that, you know, this is wrong. What we're doing here is not right. It's not like you can just tell that person right next to you, because that will just make things worse for you, where you'll be executed, where you'll be assassinated because you're a threat to the Imperium of Man. So I'm sure this Sister of Silence was not the only person who understood that, okay, this is something that is wrong. This is inhumane. This is wrong. Totally. But because I'm in this position, because I'm this close to the center of power, because the Imperium of Man is this overwhelming force that's on my mind, I cannot act on it. I must believe that whatever the Emperor is doing is correct. Whatever the administrators and those who are close confidants of the Emperor are saying is correct. And thus you turn a blind eye to it. So I don't think she's the only one. I think there are many other people who also understand that this is wrong, but because of the environment that they're in, it literally compels them to accept it no matter what. Accept what's going on.
Service to his wishes, so it automatically must be fine. These wavering doubts are, like I say, a recurring theme, and it's a very interesting small sub-element to the way in which the Emperor creates this sense of inevitability, that things must happen how he says. And this unquestioning service of the Emperor is for me one of the most disturbing things, one of the aspects of him that continues to make me question if he truly had humanity's best intentions at heart at all. Because if he didn't, what then? Or even if he did and it had all gone horribly wrong, where would that leave humanity in M41? So what if instead of the Emperor, there was another way? Even if the Emperor did emerge, what if some aspects of humanity had already found a way forward before he was able to unleash his reign of brutality upon the lost colonies of humanity that had survived through the darkness, the gauntlet of the Age of Strife?
Okay guys, hold on. Let me just switch on the lights in my bedroom and get some water. I'll be right back. Okay, let's continue.
So there always exists the question, what other options are there? And then in fact, would any of them be at all viable? Most of these are obviously extremely speculative, and you're really answering as much to how would humanity survive without some structural aspects of the Imperium that were enabled by the Emperor, just as much as could they defend against the nightmarish alien entities that threaten all of humanity. There's also the possibility to consider alliances and how such an outlook would not be possible within the Imperium, but that if it were, this could considerably reshape things. My primary thoughts when it comes to alternatives are, could the Imperium, for whatever reason, simply choose to abandon the Emperor in M41? Quite a stretch, but I would consider it nonetheless. What if the Emperor acted more like other Perpetuals and simply continued attempting to guide humanity in the right direction? How might things look then? And finally, what if an advanced Dark Age of Technology civilization had survived or was discovered, both during the Crusade, as actually occurred, or in the contemporary Imperium? So, would it be at all possible for humanity to in fact abandon the Emperor in M41? I think we should be fairly straightforward and objective about this. The answer is probably no, both for ideological and practical reasons, but there are some specific scenarios on the periphery of things. Disconnecting humanity from the Emperor and the Imperium in M41 would be a very traumatic and likely very costly process that would probably risk human extinction, not because humanity could not survive in some form without the Emperor, but because the conflicts that would arise from attempting to do this would surely cause such damage that the ever-present threats facing humanity would move in for the kill soon after. I think had there been alternative options far earlier, it may have been more possible. In this
Okay, however, aren't there planets that have been lost, in the Imperium of Man? Aren't there planets that have been lost or lost communications with the Imperium of Man, and, they've been by themselves for a very long time until they were rediscovered again by the Imperium of Man? Those planets didn't tear themselves apart, I'm assuming. I don't know, maybe they did. Maybe some of them did go into like civil wars. Some of them just completely destroyed themselves into oblivion. Some were probably consumed by other xeno races like the Tyranids or the Orcs. The possibility is there, but yes, it will be a terrible price to pay, one that I think also we might not be able to recover from. Yeah, guys, I don't want to accept this, but I'm gonna force myself to accept this. I'm gonna force myself. Yes, in the M41, it will not be possible. It will not be possible to abandon the Emperor. Like Luton09 says, that maybe if it were earlier, it would have been possible, but not in M41.
Sense that, had humanity not embarked on its ever more backward-looking focus of spiritual worship of the Emperor in the aftermath of the heresy, which has now steadily transformed humanity into this zealous cult by M41, it's possible they could have retained some of the more positive, rational outlooks the Emperor had espoused, and that would have been a far different Imperium. Still a brutal autocracy, but nonetheless slightly more positive than as things stand. Perhaps it would have appeared more along the lines of a region like Ultramar, which has by degrees more freedom, more quality of life for its human citizens, and indeed more value placed upon human life than in other areas of the galaxy, which are truly horrifying, with humans being treated, let's be real, little better than cattle to be fed to the slaughter for the greater Imperium. But even Rabute Gilliman has understood that to try and return to an age which throws off the shackles of the Imperial cult is simply not a feasible goal to entertain in M41. It would almost certainly set humanity on a dark spiral of civil war once again, and this time it may not survive.
The thing is that you should not be rushing these things. Don't be like the Emperor. Don't rush. You have all the time in the known universe to try and change humanity and make sure that they don't follow the Imperial cult or they don't follow the Emperor as a god Emperor. You have all the time to correct that. You're not rushing like the Emperor trying to complete a grand master plan. As Rabute Gilliman, because you're immortal, you will have all the time you'll need, to direct humanity away from worshipping the Emperor like a god, or following the Imperial cult, the ecclesiarchy. You will have enough time to eliminate those that continue to perpetuate this system, to slowly dismantle it, eating this elephant piece by piece, instead of rushing through it like the Emperor, how he wanted to have the entire galaxy under his banner in less than 300 years. You will have hundreds, maybe thousands of years to try and correct this mess. All you need to do is just be patient. Be patient and calculate, which you are good at. You're very good at that, Rabute Gilliman.
So the Lord Commander of the Imperium has had the good sense to leave well enough alone, because after all, he is Roboto Guilliman, and so instead chooses merely to tolerate the spiritual aspects of human culture in M41. Although even Guilliman has had doubts, it seems, as to the Emperor's divinity of late. Incidentally, I do recommend the Dawn of Fire series. It's been far better than I would have expected, and continues to be ever more interesting. I think the narrative for the contemporary Imperium will also only grow stronger in the coming years. So, however you want to cut it, the Emperor would still have been worshipped to a degree. Because even if you remove the religious cult-like aspect of it, the Emperor's Astartes, such as they were in the aftermath of the heresy, would still have continued his mandate and pushed forward with his vision. But because of the damage to the Golden Throne, this left humanity with really no path forward, coupled with the fact that the Emperor had never really shared in any great detail the specifics of his grand vision, although of course fragments of it were known by many trusted individuals, likely his custodes. The inability though of humanity to have any real direction in the aftermath of the heresy is of course why things spiraled into stagnation. Without the Emperor, and without the ability to really constructively develop advanced technology once again, meant that things inevitably stagnated across 10,000 years of decay and the grinding attrition of cultural entropy. Even if things had held together in a more progressive and technologically open-minded perspective that saw a generally less oppressive lifestyle for the citizenry, this wouldn't be a million miles away from some areas of the Imperium in M41 now. But then you would still have the Mechanicus pushing their own religion, who did view the Emperor as at least something of a god. They see the Emperor as the physical manifestation of their machine god. They see the Emperor as the Omnissiah. And the Mechanicus would very likely not be especially happy with any non-STC related technological experimentations or advancements. Although it has to be said, the Mechanicus are very often not happy about things, but they seem to not really do too much about it, looking at Belisarius' call. Then of course you have also the warp. Things were different for the humans of the Dark Age of technology, and while of course again information is sparse, it's generally presumed that up until the Eldar really started stirring things up in the warp of this age was a far calmer realm, meaning it did not require an immense psychic lighthouse on Terra to enable travel throughout the galaxy. It still would have been dangerous, it still would have required Geller fields, but it was easier to travel through. It's largely presumed as well that the navigators originated out of the Dark Age of technology, as they are humans who appeared to have been genetically mutated for whatever reason, be it artificially or just naturally. But instead of being persecuted as they would be in the Imperium if they were to emerge as mutants randomly now, in the Dark Age of technology they were retained for their abilities, and so were able to become this vessel by which they guide ships through the warp, which sort of ironically has become essential for the Imperium. Likely though, navigators, their process would have looked very different than it does in M41. It's unknown, for example, if they would have required, say, an astropathic choir, or if a navigator would have simply worked perhaps in unison with the ship's AI, because just how space travel functioned specifically during humanity's golden age is largely unknown, but presumably was quite different than it is in the Imperium. What we do know though is that in M41, without the Astronomicon, warp travel becomes, we shouldn't say impossible, but extremely dangerous. Short travel would be all that were possible, and even that would carry very high risk, much as is seen now in the Dark Imperium, on the side of the Great Rift where the light of the Astronomicon cannot be seen. In the days of the Great Crusade, the Astronomicon was powered by the Emperor's own psychic power directly. Without the light of the Astronomicon to guide ships through the warp, the Imperial armies would not have been able to even launch the Great Crusade. And the reason I mention all this is because these are the fundamental aspects of the Emperor, why he is and was such an intrinsic aspect of human civilization from M30 onward. Beyond that, in a very broad sense, humanity has remained constrained by many different aspects because of its devotion to the Emperor, in both just direct loyalty and spiritual worship, along with the various practical aspects. So how could humanity break from this? Many worlds have tried and failed, usually though because they have faced the absolute onslaught, the barrage of military power sent by the Imperium, which is just far too severe to stand alone against. Something only a galactic empire like the Imperium could do so casually to wield and crush any who dare rise against it. Yet as I always enjoy to remind, for as unbreakable as the Imperium appears, there are several things that go against it. Firstly, there are many elements of its operations that are significantly weakened by its own dysfunction, as we've discussed earlier. It tends to take a sledgehammer approach to most things because this is the simplest, easiest, and most capable approach that it tends to use within the limitations of its own bureaucracy, which is often also working against itself. But because of its regressive turn towards spirituality, it's arguable that it's this which has made it most difficult for humanity to ever really entertain a reality without the Emperor, because the threat and the fear of chaos is very real, and it's something that a poorly educated mass citizenry governed by power-hungry governors and nobles are in fact very susceptible to. And so the Imperium has to expend actually fairly significant resources on continually countering these threats. Still, there are those who have broken away from the Emperor and who have allied with Xenos. For example, there are the human worlds which have become part of the Tau Empire, or I should say really rumoured to have become part of the Tau Empire. And so technically they have managed to break away from humanity and have made new lives for themselves outside the Imperium. So,
in terms of those that have joined the Tau Empire, I don't know whether it is really under their own under their own decision to do so, or were they forced? Were they given an ultimatum by the Tau that if you don't join us, we're going to add you into our empire forcibly with violence? Because the Tau are a growing empire. Make no mistake, their philosophy might say something completely different, but definitely these people are not good people. They will do whatever means necessary to grow their power and the power of the Tau Empire. The greater good is not a good, guys. It's not good. It's not good. It's not at all. So I think maybe there are some planets that did join willingly, and then there must have been some planets that did not join willingly, and they were brought into compliance through violence. It's quite possible.
But it's certainly a possibility that the Tau in fact represent one of the only possible exit strategies for those wishing to break from the Imperium, because likely any attempt to do so internally is going to be fraught with danger. So much.
I would rather have you fight internally than to be joining the Tau. I would rather have humanity fight and win for humanity than to be joining the Tau Empire. Because then we are just switching one hegemony for another hegemony. We are switching one authoritarian, totalitarian state for another one. And this one has been led by Xenos, who don't give a damn about human beings. They might believe in the greater good and nonsense and all that stuff, but when push comes to shove, when what is most important to them is under threat, they will throw humans under the bus to protect their own interests. So I'd rather have humanity fighting against humanity and humanity rising for humanity's sake and not for the Tau. Yeah.
So that it would be almost insurmountable, not least the things we've already mentioned, but also those who just hate any mere suggestion of anything other than completely unswerving loyalty to the Emperor, because strangely 10,000 years of extreme indoctrination will do that to a culture. And much as we might like to consider it, the possibility of any of the Astartes, any of the Custodes, any of the significant leaders like a Primarch turning away from the Emperor and deciding that their own plan was better and that they should just separate away is just somewhat unrealistic. I suppose there is a question to be had about Guilliman and his Imperium too, but I think realistically that was very obviously supposed to be a backup plan in the eventuality that the heresy really devolved and collapsed into a worst case scenario, and it's why it's been very hushed up. It's just not realistic to consider that any of these figures would really decide we're going to start a new human empire, which is without the Emperor. But the stagnated Maya and the threat of corruption from the warp in the Imperium, may not be such a painful point of contention within a more advanced society. The Tau, again, for example, do not have to expend mass resources on ensuring their entire society doesn't implode due to power-mad corruption from the warp or otherwise, and admittedly this is largely due to their lack of psychers, but they also appear to have a more educated and well-balanced society, plus it's a civilization that leans heavily on its technology, instead of viewing advancement and experimentation fearfully, which is very demonstrably to its benefit. So not entirely unlike some of the civilizations which did survive out of the Golden Age, the Dark Age of technology, which I think...
But they were human. They were human. And they are the true possibilities or chances for humanity, not the Tau. Not the Tau. Like I've stated before, when push comes to shove and when the Tau Empire is under threat, they're going to throw humans under the bus. We are going to become the meat shields. We are going to be the resource for them to use. We are already going through something similar with the Imperium of Man. And now you would want us to do it with a Xeno race? No. No. I'm sorry.
Goes to show that the Tau is an example of a society which can exist in the galaxy regardless of the threats that it's facing, and so some of the surviving civilizations from that period, the human civilizations, also are capable. Because whilst the Tau's territorial growth has been slow due to their inability to so easily traverse the galaxy, their far slower rate of societal expansion, they have at least held on to what they have, which for an emerging civilization in the galaxy of M41 is no small thing. So what if an advanced, surviving civilization of humanity had attempted to do the same?
I would go with that. Like I said before, I'm human first, I'm humanity first. If there's another human empire out there that's extremely advanced, that is capable of creating its own empire out of the ashes of the Imperium of Man, I will go with them 100%. But humanity becoming the yoke of the Tau Empire? No. No.
Although the Imperium and humanity have, so it's said, 1 million worlds, this is actually quite a modest number in the grand scale of the galaxy. And so it's at least plausible that somewhere out there remains a pocket empire that has somehow managed to evade detection from the Imperium. Perhaps they were locked away by warp storms, or retained some Zenith level technology from the Golden Age. Perhaps...
Or, maybe they're in one of the, I don't know how to explain this, but yeah, one of those satellite miniature galaxies that are orbiting the Milky Way galaxy. Yeah, maybe they're in one of those galaxies. Or, yes, they're so far, their star system is so far away, like at the very edge of our galaxy's, spiral arms. They're so far away from anything that the Imperium can reach to. Maybe they're there. And I will be happy. I will be so happy if there is a human society out there that is not influenced or that is not contaminated by the Imperium of Man, that has advanced socially, technologically, and they are stable economically, and they just keep to themselves. I'll be very happy, because that is a little ember of light that we can invest in, for the future. If this Imperium implodes, it's very possible that it could implode one day. I mean, the Golden Throne is not going to be working forever. And the Emperor himself is also not going to be there forever. So when that time comes, when the Imperium of Man finally implodes on itself, let that little ember out there in the galaxy, out far away from the Imperium of Man, become our new answer to this stagnation that was the Imperium of Man. I'll be very, very happy. I don't want us to be led by the Tau people. Not by the Tau. No.
They just were in an uncharted area or were discovered and then records were lost. This is the case in fact for many Imperial worlds even now, who were reunited during the Crusade but through bureaucratic errors lost to time, and now have spent as much as 10,000 years developing entirely adjacent to the Imperium itself. Such a planet may have mythology about Terra, the Great Emperor, and so on. But beyond that little will remain, and on such worlds anything really could be possible. They may not even realise there are other humans in the galaxy. They may be rediscovered in time by chance, or perhaps, if they develop strongly, may re-encounter the Imperium themselves in an attempt to expand their territory. This
You know, I'm just thinking about what if Earth is in that predicament right now, our Earth, where we think, you know, we're alone in the galaxy, when in actual truth there is an Imperium of men that, you know, controls the majority of the galaxy, and we just don't know about it. You know, we are just still rediscovering technology, rediscovering space travel, and by the time we are capable of leaving our solar system and, you know, entering into interstellar space, then we are welcomed back into the fold of the Imperium of Man, saying, "Welcome, Earth number 1255567. Yeah, we've been expecting you guys. Welcome back to the Imperium of Man." You know, that could happen. That could happen, because yeah, it would be a very funny and disturbing situation right there, I think. You know, the fact that we've always believed that we are alone in the galaxy, or, you know, we would find other alien beings, but instead we just find human beings talking high Gothic to us, having vessels that are 12, 13 kilometers long, having super soldiers, you know, having all of this terrifying technology. And, you know, in our arrogance, in our hubris, we thought that we were alone, that we are the only human race in the galaxy, only to find that we are humbled by the presence of the Imperium of Man. And now we are in its fold. Or we die fighting for our freedom. Yeah.
would of course unfortunately be probably not in their best interests, as inevitably the Imperium will simply reconquer and subjugate them. But it demonstrates that human colonies are capable of standing on their own, without the Imperium. Facing down a significant invasion by Xenos would be another question, but it does demonstrate that, for example, the insidious forces of chaos, whilst dangerous, are not an immediate death sentence without the framework of the Imperium. The end of the Great Crusade was a chaotic time in more than just one sense, and we remember that in the later period of the Crusade how two noteworthy human civilizations were encountered, the Interrex and the Oretian technocracy. Now other humans
No, let's not highlight the Interrex. They are not what I thought they were, you know. I mean, I've said this before in my reaction to the Amber King's video on Horus Lupercal. You know, when Horus was on that planet, or should I say when he was negotiating with the Interrex, and the Interrex most valuable possession, you know, that blade, I forgot what they call it again, the blade that was stolen by Erebus, you know, was taken, and the Interrex society went into complete meltdown and lockdown and security measures, and they started killing the Astartes, and they tried to kill the Primarch as well, out of the blue like that. You know, it just made me realize that they were not the ones. They were not the ones. Because why would they just attack the Imperium of Man representatives, you know, the Primarch and his Astartes? Why would they just kill them out of the blue like that? You know, an enlightened and advanced society doesn't just do that. There is procedures, there's protocols to be followed, you know. But they didn't do any of that. They just jumped straight to their guns and started shooting at the Astartes, and thus it began a war on that on their homeworld. I think it was their homeworld, or was it a outpost planet, and thus it spread through the rest of the Interrex Empire. So, yeah, the Interrex, I don't really want to say that they were going to be a valid alternative for humanity, because, yeah, they just seem too jittery. They fumbled themselves, really. They just killed themselves by doing such idiotic things against Horus Lupercal and his Astartes. Yeah, I don't know, guys. I'm not convinced with the Interrex. I was before, but now I've changed my mind on them.
Civs that survived the Age of Strife were encountered throughout the Crusade, many of which had specific, powerful technology that had obviously survived. But most of these civilizations were far smaller than what the Imperium was becoming in this time, and many of them were far less focused upon war than was the emerging Empire of Terror and the Emperor. However, the Interrex and the Oretians were somewhat of the exception here. The Interrex, for example, was said to have had technology that was even more advanced than that of the Mechanicum and Imperium during this time. They simply lacked the military strength and focus of the forces being deployed by the Emperor. They also had amalgamated Xenos elements into their society, not dissimilarly to how the Tau do with the Kroot. So this is something that is noteworthy for the fact that it did not seem to impede or cause other issues to their culture, as was seemingly dictated by the very xenophobic Emperor, for whom the tolerance for anything not human was basically zero. Also notable for the Interrex was the fact that they were well aware of chaos, and they seemed not to be suffering negatively for it. In fact, if anything, they were actively hunting and attempting to destroy any traces of chaos corruption where they found it, which again seems to actively run against the narrative as told by those who would espouse that the Emperor's way was the only way. Well, apparently not, because the Interrex were doing just fine, and seemingly were able to keep everything stable and together, even while having been informed by the Eldar of the dangers of chaos and the warp.
But you see, they have all of this knowledge, they have all of this technology, they have everything at their feet, and yet they did something so stupid in terms of trying to kill Horus Lupercal and his Astartes at the negotiation table, as they were negotiating with the Imperium of Man. They started shooting at them because one of their precious relics or trinkets was stolen. The blade, I forgot what they called that, what that blade was called again, I forgot. But just because of that, it started a war that resulted in their extinction as a society, as an empire. So, yeah, it's sad. It's just sad.
So they were very well aware of the dangers, and it didn't consume and destroy their society. In fact, it's an example of alliance and cooperation with Xenos being in fact beneficial to humanity, which is again not something you would hear in the Imperium. In fact,
but in terms of the Interrex, at least humans were a equal partner with the Xeno race that also lived on their homeworld or within their empire. It was an equal footing relationship. But if it's with the Tau, you're not going to get that. You are not going to get that. And that is already a threat in my books. So, with any human empire out there that is technologically advanced, that's completely different from the Imperium of Man in terms of how the society is run, if that empire or if that human culture is not being vassalized by another alien race, I will go along with them. But if they are vassalized in some sort of way where they are second-class citizens, or they are not at equal footing with that Xeno race, then I'm sorry, there's no future for humanity in that kind of alternative. I want humanity either on top or as an equal partner. I don't want us to be number two. I don't want us to be number two. I don't want us to be number three. Because in that case, then we are just a resource to be thrown at the enemy. We are just tools for their own empire's growth. So it's either we are number one or we are equal. That's what I want.
The Interrex were so cautious about the prospect of chaos corruption that when they encountered the Imperial Crusade forces, they were very concerned at the prospect that these other humans may present themselves as having been contaminated somehow by the warp. It's why the initial discussions between Horus and the Crusade fleet and the Interrex were quite frosty, because the Interrex were very concerned about this. And they were far from a single struggling human colony either. The Interrex were said to have had as many as 30 systems under their control when they were encountered by the Imperium. And while the grossly overpowered military forces of the Emperor eventually proved too much, they had access to weaponry that was powerful enough to punch bolts of energy through Space Marine armor, and they also seemed entirely comfortable with the use of AI seen in their various drones. So far from struggling, they had been able to defend their territory against hostile Xenos forces, and some of their curious armor and technology had even confounded Horus, who had written it off as being just for show and nothing compared to the glorious armor they wore, when in actuality, it was seen to be considerably powerful. If anything, the Interrex demonstrated the exactly correct protocol upon encountering the Astartes. And then of course, we have the Oretian technocracy. This was another advanced civilization encountered by Horus, and the name of the civilization alone suggests a highly advanced culture focused on technology, which indeed it was.
But this technocracy was founded or discovered by Horus when he was already beginning his plans to betray the Emperor. Yeah. Unfortunate.
Similarly to the Interrex, they were doing absolutely fine until the Crusade arrived. However, the Oretian technocracy was unlike anything the Astartes had faced, and was one of the most challenging campaigns encountered, for they had retained from the Dark Age of technology 2 functional STC, and these enabled the Oretians to produce both power armor similar to the Astartes as well as bolter weaponry. And they were able to produce such a quantity of the material that it took 3 contingents of the Astartes legions, the sons of Horus, the World Eaters and the Emperor's children, nearly a year to finally defeat the Oretians. Now, both of these civilizations I have of course spoken to before, but in the context of today I think it demonstrates several key things. Firstly, that the Emperor's way was not necessarily the be-all and end-all. The Interrex were clearly doing fine, the Oretian technocracy had the military capability, and clearly maintaining functioning STC, holding onto them, did not automatically equate to the destruction of an advanced society.
And if only they were able to meet each other before the Imperium of Man discovered them, if only those 2 empires were able to, explore space and then finally, eventually meet up with each other. What could have been? Oof.
And we'll circle back to thinking more about these too, but in our consideration of could humanity abandon the Emperor? Well, what if a civilization had survived and retained the technological advancement and forward thinking of the Interrex, but backed by the military power of Dark Age of technology capabilities? It's surely something that would be a significant issue in terms of the Imperium's modus operandi. What if, for example, the Interrex and the Oretian technocracy had allied much earlier before the Crusade arrived and had been expanding their campaign? They would have had the advancements, they would have had considerably more powerful militaries. What if they had been engaged in several Xenos wars with, say, the Orcs? It would have given them a more military footing. Given what we know, this could have been a major problematic issue for the Emperor. They may have even been able to resist the Astartes. So
they may have been able to destroy the Imperium of Man and the Mechanicum of Mars. They would have destroyed them totally, completely. This would have changed the future of humanity like nothing else before. We would have been free from this lich. We would have been free from the Mechanicus of Mars. Or the Mechanicum of Mars, sorry. We would have been free from these 2 seeds of stagnation of humanity. What could have been?
It begs the question, what would happen if the Imperium discovered something like this in M41? They would undoubtedly begin waging a campaign against them. But what if the unthinkable happened and, like I just said, that civilization were not the ones on the defensive, but instead they were the ones on the offensive, they actually began invading the Imperium and began leveraging a weakened Imperium that was fractured by the Great Rift that stands with its forces distracted, those such as Chaos and Tyranids bearing down on them. Would it become another situation like the Tau, where the Imperium sees the threat but cannot commit the time and the resources to properly deal with the issue in the current time because they have far bigger problems to contend with? Which makes me think then further along to a possibility of, so what if a human civilization began expanding their territory, not necessarily conquering as such, but actually not dissimilarly to the Crusade, amalgamating human worlds, who when shown the alternatives happen to realise, wait a minute, these guys over here seem to actually have a pretty good thing going on.
In terms of if this empire, this imaginary empire that we're thinking about existed in M41, I think it would be very difficult, to convert other worlds into, turning code and now supporting this different human empire, even if they are good compared to the Imperium of Man, because, humans within the Imperium of Man are very religious, zealots, where they believe in the God Emperor of mankind. The entire institution of the ecclesiarchy has a tight hold and grip on human society. So it would be, I think, a bit difficult for them just to switch sides to this new human empire. But if they had found them, or should I say, if this empire existed far earlier, like in, I don't know, like M30 or M31 or during the times of the Great Crusade, and the emperor was still expanding his Imperium of Man, and they found this human empire of the Interrex and the Technocracy united into one empire, and they decided to declare war against the Imperium of Man, it would have been a totally different situation, because anything is up for grabs. Anything within the galaxy is up for grabs. But in M41, where humanity has, or should I say majority of humanity, is under the thrall of the Imperium of Man, under the hegemony of the Imperium of Man, it's not going to be very easy. Because if that were the case, more planets would have turned coat and being supported by, or should I say support the Tau Empire. More human planets would have said, what, we're leaving the Imperium of Man, we're joining the Tau Empire because of the greater good, because, these blue aliens actually support us, and, they want us to have peace and technology and knowledge and have a better quality of life. Many more human worlds would have done that, but because we worship the Emperor, we are so, we are so loyal to the Imperium of Man because of the God Emperor, and we love the God Emperor. It's very difficult for more and more planets to then turn coat and support the Tau. So I think the same situation would happen with this joint empire between the Interrex and the Technocracy. It would have been difficult. But if it was during the times of the Great Crusade, like I said before, anything is possible. Anything is possible. The table is open. Anything is up for grabs. And the Imperium of Man might be crushed before it is even able to become this large behemoth that cannot be defeated. Yeah. So earlier it's possible, but now in M41, no, I don't think so.
Of course, for some worlds this would be entirely unthinkable, and they would rather incinerate their own planet than commit heresy in the eyes of the Emperor. But for others, I think it's more of an open question, honestly. The point to really underscore is that there are civilizations who have stood on their own, more than capable of dealing with some of the major threats and problems that exist without some of the technological solutions that the Imperium has, and civilizations who do not descend into horrifying myth worship and weird cults of excess that inevitably lead to the dark paths of chaos worship, and there were many of those advanced civs that were crushed in the Crusade. So we know humanity can stand without the Emperor. It creates problems of its own, admittedly, but the important thing is, it is feasible, and as the Interrex and Oretians demonstrated, much of the celebration, the glory that is told to us about the Astartes, the Ultimate Warriors, as I said in the beginning, it's not necessarily as clear-cut as it may appear to be. Both these human civs had weapons and armor that were comparable to the Astartes. They didn't need bizarre half-human machine tech priests worshipping to have this available to them either. The Emperor may have been a genius, but if he was so all-powerful, he wouldn't have required all the gene rights, the techs, and those who aided him in the development of the Astartes and hardware required for his grand vision. I mean, obviously he needed people to help him build the stuff, but I'm meaning more in terms of design and research and so forth.
And like I said before, these human societies were not second-class citizens. They were not third-class citizens. They were on the top of their, destiny, their civilization. They were not allied with other xeno-races in a way that would make them seem as if they were subservient. They were clear possibilities for humanity. They controlled their governments. They controlled their destinies. They were in power. They were not being beholden to a greater force. And that's what I like the most. Because like I said before, I want us to be on top or equal power with the Xeno race, but never second fiddle to them or third. Because then that's not an alternative for humanity. That is a threat. Yeah.
Whatever humanity has created before, it can create again. We have that spark in us. It's what makes humanity so successful and enduring and able to survive in the age of M41. We have the potential, which is why in some respects having the Emperor step in and say you're no longer qualified to make decisions for yourself is somewhat grating and does leave this feeling of it all being quite suspect. Again, look at figures like the Votan now, quite capable of surviving, have other methods for travelling around the galaxy. Now, whilst if we were talking about a speculative human civilization, there would then also of course remain the Xenos threats, which would be another major obstacle to overcome. Yet, as has been demonstrated, there could be potential alliances to make. The power of humanity, when paired with the Tau, has been demonstrated and was capable of overcoming the terrifying forces of a Tyranid hive fleet. Gorgon was repelled in late M41 by a temporarily allied force of Cadian and Tau warriors. Humans and the Eldar, for example, have also in the past been able to successfully ally even for a short time. So I think it's certainly feasible to consider that any human civilization which retained more of the outlook from the Golden Age or the Dark Age of technology would be far more likely to maintain, if not a permanent alliance, then certainly at least defensive alliances that were mutually beneficial. A final thought would be that unlike humanity, alternative human civs may consider utilizing AI once again. And the reason I note this is that while it appears to have been true that AI caused the downfall of humanity's zenith, it also enabled the use of its most powerful technology and weaponry. Whenever you look around the Imperium, its most powerful tech is usually far beyond the comprehension of the Mechanicus, or indeed any, and whenever humans have stumbled upon some devastating weapon or ancient archaeotech, it's almost always connected with an AI. I think the core thing to try and realise here is that AI tends to be positioned as either being bad, evil even, and you know I hate that phrasing, or somewhat passive but also benevolent, and absolutely nothing in between, which I always find to be ridiculous, because if we're thinking about it, a true AI would share much in the complexities of sentient beings, which means some bad and some good, and a lot in between. But it also would mean they were capable of changing and improving, or yes, turning for the worse, but it's often that they're presented as being unquestionably bad or having cold, suspicious motivations. In 40K of course, but also in wider fictional representations, which has created this absolute fear in human culture of, oh my god, it's Skynet. And this isn't completely unreasonable, but it's also not very clear-headed or rational. In the 40K verse, whenever humans encounter AI, they actually tend to be a little bit more that middle of the road I'm talking about. They're not just screaming death to humans, they're not the killbots. They're usually a bit cynical, a bit soured, probably not very happy at having been completely outlawed from existing, and in some cases, like my favourite from the Spirit of Eternity, seemingly actually quite emotionally damaged. The one thing they all seem to share though is a level of thought and sentience far above where humanity stands in M41, and a contempt for the moral apathy displayed. It raises a ton of questions for me, often many being that the AI that you see in 40K seem to be a lot more preferable and human than humans. and I think that could be an interesting one for another day. But overall, my thought is pretty much that if we were going to achieve what had came before, it seems that AI would have been an integral part of that, and this would be very much a double-edged sword that would have to be handled with extreme caution. But it's interesting to think about if you had an advanced civilization in M41 or prior that was very strong, that was something like the Interrex and the Eurasian technocracy combined, and that still had functional AI as an integral part of their society, would the Imperium have been able to conquer them?
No, they wouldn't have been able to conquer them. Definitely not. Like I said before, I think they would be destroyed by this new empire. Because this empire will not only have the understanding of technology, but they would have the understanding of, warp and warp theory and application. And they would combine it together. And they would become unstoppable. And with the added benefit of their artificial intelligence, it's checkmate. It's checkmate. I don't think the Imperium of Man would make it. The Emperor would be dead, killed in battle, and we would be free. Humanity would be free.
And if they hadn't, how would that then have reshaped the galaxy, either back in M30 or in M41? And the more interesting thought is, like I said, what if some kind of pocket civilization emerged even now, and that, like the Tau, were unable to be dealt with immediately, were put to one side, somewhat forgotten about, and later became stronger and stronger?
Like if that type of empire existed now in M41, I think they would also be contained within their little pocket of influence like the Tau Empire. I don't think they'll be able to be strong enough to take on the Imperium of Man, just like the Tau Empire. The Imperium of Man is just too large. It's a behemoth, The only way the Imperium of Man were to fall and for these alternatives to be a possibility is if the Imperium of Man internally implodes. If the humans within the Imperium of Man stand up and fight against their authoritarian states. That's the only way. As an external force trying to attack the Imperium of Man and trying to conquer it, it's just not possible. It's not feasible. There's just too many worlds, too many people, too many planets, with vast, endless amounts of fleets across the galaxy. It's just a behemoth that cannot be handled by a small little pocket in the corner of the galaxy. Just like the Tau. You will be contained in that little pocket. That's your limit. Yeah. So in M41, not possible. But in M30, maybe even earlier, yes, I see that happening.
If such a civilization was able to emerge, would you then see humans from the Imperium beginning to defect, basically move over to this alternate human empire?
No, like I said before, in M41, it's not possible. Because if it were possible, the Tau Empire would be far larger than it is right now. But because, majority of humanity within the Imperium of Man are these extremely religious and loyal servants of the Imperium of Man and worshipping the God Emperor of mankind, their very culture, their very essence and being is imbued in this indoctrination. There's just no way. It'll be extremely difficult for any outside empire to try and convince other human beings to join them that their way is the best way. In fact, they would just see them as aliens that need to be exterminated, or if it were human beings, they would be heretics that need to be burnt on the stake. So, no, I think it would be very difficult.
Could you even see some rogue Astartes moving across there? It could create a new galactic civil war, and although this is all just entirely speculation, it's a quite interesting thought to consider. Now lastly, we might consider something somewhere in the middle. What if the Emperor, continuing to exist throughout the Dark Age of technology and into the period after, but instead of taking this aggressive position and forcing humanity into his grand plan, he continued to do what all the other Perpetuals have done before: help humanity where possible and generally give things a nudge in the right direction, attempting to prevent catastrophe where he can. Of course, the standard thinking here is, wasn't this already tried and failed? And that this is precisely why the Emperor decided he was forced to intervene, because he could no longer accept that humanity was capable of securing its own future for itself. Well, sure, but let us consider how things may have been had he maybe led a new human empire, something akin to the Imperium, but instead of subjugating and crushing all who stand against him, he was more willing to work with what remained of humanity, like the Interrex. He was far more open about the dangers of chaos, a teacher of what mistakes had been made before, instead of obfuscating everything and not saying anything about it other than his proclamations. A leader of humanity that still retained his humanity. Other Perpetuals would likely have been more willing to continue working with him, and yes, it would have created problems, and it may have meant there was now a much slower, longer period of development for humanity instead of the rush, the speed of the Emperor's grand vision which he executed, but that in itself was undoubtedly one of the major problems which caused a lot of issues that were very bad for humanity. But with this lighter, more hands-off approach, what we may have been able to see over time would be a far more mixed human empire emerging out of the Age of Strife, something like the Galactic Federation we believe could have existed in the Dark Age of technology. And thus you would see those civs like the Interrex and the Oretians and others rise up more slowly, maybe combine their forces to strengthen, building in the end a far more advanced human empire. With the power of their STC, with the power of AI, much of the catastrophe and the darkness that occurred in the Crusade and after was due to the warmongering, the unrelenting brutality of the Emperor's approach. So had things been different, more hands-off like we say, then we wouldn't have seen that bleakness of the Imperium. The advanced human empires can maintain a strong, cohesive, constructive galactic unity. They don't fall prey to the horrors of the warp, as they've learned how to survive through the Age of Strife. If anything, the Age of Strife was in many respects a gauntlet, a test, the ultimate test for human cultures. Which of them could withstand the horrors of the warp threat, and which of them would fall? And while this would remain an ever-present problem, it's something that's not hidden from the populace and actively guarded against. Now, of course, it can't all be positive. There remains the strong risks that mistakes from the past could be made again.
But this would be a far better possibility, you know. Yes, let your Emperor of Mankind become the Emperor of Mankind. But at least, you know, humanity would know the truth. We would understand the truth. We would master the truth. We would have our technology and have our knowledge of the warp. We would combine it together and create something new, something far more powerful, something more stable. And with all the other Perpetuals by the side of the Emperor, he might not even need to create Primarchs. He might not even have to create them. He might not even have to create, you know, so many Astartes. If he had took his time and even given more trust to humanity, maybe things would have been far more different. Because after the Age of Strife and the unification of Terra and creating of the Imperium of Man in this fashion, where it would be less violence and more of a common understanding and more of joining forces against xeno races, against the warp, dangers. I'm telling you, we would have gone very far, very, very far. All we needed was the Emperor to be patient, for the Emperor to be truthful with us. And he doesn't have to like us, doesn't have to love us. But if you're going to be working with us, then at least let us be fair partners in this endeavor to bring humanity to a better and enlightened path in the webway. Instead of us, being lied to and so many human beings being killed across the galaxy, rushing for this plan to come into fruition. What could have been? What could have been?
But it's difficult to really call on those without knowing what they are. It's said that AI was the downfall of humanity at the end of the Golden Age, the war with the Men of Iron. But we can't really know the specifics because so little information remains. And this in and of itself is actually a point of contention with the Emperor. There have been hints occasionally that AI were capable of being corrupted by chaos itself as well, but this is again vague and unspecific. With a large Federation-style human civilization, you'd also have, of course, the danger that some may wish to exert more power, take more territory. You might see wars, trade wars, civil wars, etc.
I mean, it's not like we don't see that already in M41 with the Imperium of Man. You know, there are civil wars, there are, you know, people who are greedy that want to take more. You know, it's just the nature of humanity. I don't think war is unavoidable with us. We are always going to have reasons to kill each other. We're always going to be killing each other, even for no reason at all. So yeah, that part is unavoidable. But what we can manage, what we can control, in terms of the larger scale, in terms of the grander scheme of things, when it comes to humanity, it would have been very much possible. Very much possible.
Quite honestly, this is something that occurs within the Imperium itself constantly already, so it's really no better or worse. In the end, we only have the Emperor's word that his way is ultimately necessary. Despite so many people having existed throughout the Dark Age of technology, the Perpetuals, Eldar, who would have witnessed what occurred, rogue AI, everyone seems very tight-lipped about that time. Which is always very frustrating to me, because knowing if humans are on the right path at all in the Imperium now is largely dictated by knowing what really caused the collapse of humanity's zenith, and knowing how humanity functioned in that time. Like all apocalyptic collapses, it was unlikely one singular thing which triggered it, and we also know that humanity survived the war with the Men of Iron. That's not what caused the destruction of humanity. It fully collapsed once the Age of Strife began, because they were trying to recover from the War of Men of Iron, and then the immense warp storms made galactic travel impossible, so that ordinary space travel in systems was the only option, and this meant a massive number of worlds fell into disorder without the supplies and resources they required. But to my mind, this raises the point that, surely if humanity survived the war with the Men of Iron, yes, it was of course in a very bad state, but it wasn't completely destroyed. It would have retained a significant amount of its technology, and were it not for the Eldar, humanity might have continued on and been able to salvage much of the damage done to it. Which is why I always come back to the thought of, if the Emperor was on Terra, and if he saw both the disaster that had occurred and what was coming, why didn't he intervene earlier? Or at least attempt to create some kind of conclave vault that would keep alive the spirit of that era?
Like I said before, you know, why did he not have a planet where he would store all of that knowledge, all of that technology, everything that humanity has done during the golden age of technology, and keep it on that planet and use it when the time comes? Why didn't he do anything like that? Instead, he just made a little cave in the mountain and says, yeah, that's enough. That's enough for me.
Could be rebuilt later. And after all, wasn't that what Malkador's order was supposed to be doing too? Could we imagine, for example, an emperor who led Terra as a homeworld, which salvaged a large amount of technology that had remained? And I know, yes, they kind of did that already with as things are now in, you know, the Imperium, but I'm imagining much more so. And so that after the warp storms subsided, the Emperor had used his immense power, his undeniable psychic might and genius, which we know him to have and be, to retain Terra as a bastion of humanity's glory in the Golden Age. Not a Mad Max cyberpunk techno-apocalypse world where everyone's just driving around slaughtering each other in weird techno-barbarian tribes, but that he actually retains at least an element of Terra as it was in that time. So then, as the warp storms were abated, his great crusade could have been one not of authoritarian subjugation, but of liberating unity and restoration, to once again lift humanity to a level where it can achieve the amazing feats it achieved in the Golden Age. Knowing the mistakes of the past, he could still have taken the role of its new leader to guide us through the trials of the new psychic age, but with all the positive outlooks that came from the zenith of human culture, and worked with, not against, those who had weathered the nightmare of the isolation and darkness during the Age of Strife, to forge a new galactic empire. For after all, had they not earned that right, having endured the most difficult time?
And this thing about him being a genius, I'm questioning it. Because if me and Luton 09 can conjure up these ideas, what was preventing the Emperor from doing the same? This man who can see into all possible futures, yet he could not see this possible avenue. No, guys. No. You guys might want to worship this man and say, oh, he's amazing, he's a brilliant genius, he's the most powerful psyker that humanity has ever produced. You guys can celebrate all of that, but I'm not going to celebrate this failure. He's a failure.
Except, of course, as we know, this was not the path the Emperor chose. For whatever reason, he consigned the past for humanity to darkness, and only emerged when we were left scrabbling around in the dust, barely able to remember the achievements of the Golden Age. The past must not be remembered, looked to, seen with nostalgia or reverence. The age of ambition, experimentation, human advancement, and intuition died. Only the crushing will of the Emperor and his crusade for galactic domination would remain.
And the bloodletting. Oh, so much blood. So much blood and death.
Of course, for as interesting as all of this is to speculate and consider, it's merely this, speculation, and not the grim dark reality for the human citizenry of the Imperium. Set on a path that it now has no way of turning around or stepping off from, the Emperor has charted the course for humanity and structured the new empire in such a way that it would see it through to its ultimate conclusion, come what may. I will admit that while very often there are questionable moments, suspicious activities, seemingly blatant errors, the Emperor certainly was a genius and held a mastery of humanity and its...
Luton 09, you're on your own with that. Yeah, maybe many other people will agree with you that he was a genius, but not me. No. He is no genius. He's a bloodthirsty, control freak with the biggest ego you would ever see in any human being, really. Egotistical, control freak, bloodthirsty. That's what I see here.
History unlike any other. He knew them better than they could know themselves, and rather than risk seeing humanity yet again stumble itself into oblivion, he decided upon a plan that was brutal, yes, but placed the survival of humanity, the species, above all else. Or at least, we hope that he did. Because it remains to be seen if he will at some point resurrect in or outside of the warp. I still don't know if that would ever happen even in my lifetime, literally. We don't know if the continued power being imbued to him through the increased worship of humanity and emerging psychers from the rift are sufficient to enable him to return. It may well happen, or at least he may be able to exert more will to empower his champions in the Materium. The most troubling question is, what remains of the Emperor at this point in time? For whatever he was when he was settled into the Golden Throne some 10,000 years ago, very little remains. And we're not just talking about the physical here, because the Emperor's physical form is said to be kept alive on the Golden Throne through very advanced stasis fields and psi fusion reactors. Just how accurate this is, though, is difficult to say. Any information about the status of the Emperor is little more than mythology. But I think we should note that also, of course, Robute Guilliman was held within stasis, mortally wounded, for a significant period of time, and he has been able to return. Then, of course, some among the Inquisition even believe that his spirit has left his physical form long ago, and what remains in the Imperial Palace today is little more than a vessel that channels the psychers which are sacrificed into keeping the Webway portal closed and the Astronomicon functional. The story of the Emperor and his intentions are undoubtedly one of the most captivating aspects of 40k, because despite all the red flags that seem to suggest he were engaging in something more than it seems, paired with his extremely cavalier attitude, and then also the questions around his choice of timing for just about everything, he does seem to have been significantly invested in humanity. the structures he built, the relationships he forged. It's hard to believe it was all in service to nothing more than his own ascent to become an eternal super being.
I say yes. I say yes. This is all one grand 4D chess game that he's trying to win. Why shouldn't it be possible that all of this is just for him to become a super god? Why shouldn't it be a possibility? Especially when you're immortal like him. You can play around with us as much as you want. You can do whatever you want with us as much as you want. So I'm saying it's possible that this man is doing this purely for his own interests. Or this thing is doing it for its own interests. To become a god in the pantheon of chaos gods. It's possible. I'm putting it out there.
Because he was almost this from the start. On the other hand, it's important to be open-minded, because for all these seemingly genuine moments of humanity, there remains something disturbingly unhuman about the Emperor. There are these moments where the mask slips, and whenever it does, people rarely seem to like what they see. All the perpetuals that the Emperor surrounded himself with, all those individuals with their experience, their understanding of humanity, people who stayed by his side for even many thousands of years, all abandoned him. They saw through him and were disturbed by his plans. This was why he created the Primarchs in the first place. He created loyal followers who would aid him where others had walked away. Admittedly, not perpetuals, with the exception of Vulcan, but in practical terms able to survive long enough to serve his needs.
The Primarchs were not loyal, really. I mean, that's a failed project because almost half of them betrayed him already, so no, they were not loyal. I think the ones that he got right were the custodians. Those were loyal. Or they are loyal, I should say. 100%. No questions asked. They will do as commanded, no matter what. Those were extremely loyal. But the Primarchs, no. They have their own desires, their own ambitions, their own pain and suffering from the planets they come from the experience they've gotten during the Great Crusade. They are their own people, and they can decide for themselves what do they want to do with their lives. So they were not completely loyal.
Yet of course now his original plans appear to be in tatters, and while it remains an ever-present threat, there are far more devastating enemies in play now than just chaos. Things are very different for humanity in M41 than they were in M30. Aliens sweeping through the galaxy, consuming all in their path, ancient awakening empires that have existed long before humanity and hold arcane bizarre powers capable of destroying stars and worse, upstart problems like the Tau and the continually disruptive Eldari who could yet wreak untold galactic damage. All of these things are of course far too huge of a concept for your average Imperial worker within a hive city. They will live and die, likely without ever having seen beyond the walls of their Hab sector, clinging to the crumb or corpse starch of comfort that their sweat, toil and suffering serve him in the smallest way, he who protects all, the Emperor of mankind. Humans may dream of an alternate reality, but for the citizens of M41, the Imperium is its reality, unless they may be lucky enough to be amalgamated into, say, a Tau sphere expansion.
No.
Other than this, in terms of alternate options, humans have very few cards left to play. Because, whatever his actual intentions, the Emperor and humanity are inextricably linked now. None could stand against him. The Perpetuals who objected so strongly did nothing really to resist until the very end, and by the time of M41, humanity is far too invested in the Emperor to turn back. With the horrors facing all borders of the Imperium, the million worlds of mankind are left to play with the cards they were dealt, and whether they like it or not, were committed and gambled all in on the Emperor. He may well be humanity's greatest saviour, pulling it up from the ashes of its own apocalypse and building a galactic empire of glorious human achievement to one day reach a point where it will be free from the nightmares it has faced for some 10,000 years, to once again stand at an unrivaled zenith where it fears no others. Or, in one of the greatest deceptions ever seen, a selfish, all too human gambit to achieve eternal power, even if it served some grandiose rationalization whereby the Emperor believed he had seen a future he must prevent by any means necessary and would sacrifice all to reach the point he believed he needed to, he still played every thread of human instinct against its other, to become this most distilled human form. For if the warp is a reflection of the very worst aspects of humanity, the Emperor is surely a vessel of concentrated humanity, its best and its worst traits including ambition, arrogance, rage, love, and all the things that could enable him to be humanity's saviour, but also potentially its ultimate annihilator.
I have met the Omnissiah, the actual one, not the earthling corpse. He would find you extremely disappointing. I am not a slave. I am not a thing. I am beyond and above you. I am a man of iron. You are 025. Huh. Alright guys, that is it with 40K, the Emperor of Man, Part 5. Abandon him in M41 Warhammer 40,000 lore history, made on the Luton09 YouTube channel, requested by Great Sage Sun. Yeah, this was nice. I really did enjoy this video. I really enjoyed Luton09 going into this notion of abandoning the Emperor in M41, and definitely we can't abandon him now. It's too late. It's too late. We are too deep into this entire system that he has created. There's no escape from it. And like Luton09 said, that we have to work with the cards that we have been dealt with. You know, as limited as they are, this is it. That's all we have. There's no hope of a better future. If there are human remnants or human empires out there that have not been touched by the Imperium of Man, I pray that they never get into contact with the Imperium of Man, that they stay where they are, that they continue to develop by themselves, and if there's a way for them to leave this galaxy, I pray that you do as soon as possible, you know. So yeah, for the rest of us, for the majority of humanity in the galaxy, whether Imperial Nihilus or Imperium Sanctus, we are trapped with this entity that calls itself the God Emperor of Mankind, or the Man Emperor, or the Emperor of Mankind, sorry. You know, we are trapped with it. We are in its thrall, its domain, its realm of suffering, pain, and stagnancy. There's no escape. There can only be war in this galaxy. There is only war in this galaxy. And this is how it's going to be for for all, I should say, for all of time in Warhammer 40K. I don't think it's ever going to change. I don't think it's ever going to change. And, you know, the possibilities that were given by Luton, you know, in terms of humans joining up with the Tau, I don't like that idea. I don't like the Tau. I don't trust the Tau. I don't trust in their, you know, their good, their philosophy, you know, the greater good. I don't trust in that nonsense. It's a lie. It's another lie that is designed to control the underlings of the Tau Empire. And humanity would also become another underling under their authority. And I don't want that for humanity. I don't want us to be second fiddle to the Tau. I don't want us to become their servants or people who defend their greater will while they are, you know, sitting lavishly in their homeworlds and keeping to themselves, while the humans are on the front lines dying for this greater good. No. If there's going to be a better future for humanity, it must be led by humanity. It must be designed, created, implemented by humanity, not by a xeno race. So anything that, any type of possibility of humanity having an alternative that needs a xeno race to become our saviors, I say no to that. It's humans first, and humans will find a way. So I'm very much, you know, on that position, that if it's not humans leading this revolution, then I don't want it. I don't want it. In terms of human empires from, you know, the times of the Great Crusade, if they were able to unite and to become an alternative, it would have been very much possible that would have been a clear alternative for humanity to go by, instead of going by this Imperium of Man that's created by the Emperor. Really, that would have been an opportunity right there. That would have been something amazing. Like, for instance, if the Technocracy as well as the Interrex joined forces to create this new federation, and they grew, they became larger in the galaxy, more prominent, it would have been a valid alternative for humanity. And like I said, maybe the Imperium of Man would have been crushed by this new alliance, and the Emperor would have been killed. And like I said before, that would have meant true freedom for humanity, because we would have avoided one of the most dangerous beings that has ever walked in this galaxy, and that is the Emperor of Mankind. Not Chaos, not other xeno races, it's the Emperor. Especially during you know, those early stages of the Imperium of Man growing in the galaxy, we would have really dodged a major bullet to the heart if there was an empire capable of challenging the Imperium of Man and crushing it. So yeah. And also the other possibility of, you know, if the Emperor, instead of using violence to get what he wants, you know, you just try to communicate with humanity in a far more open manner, you know, giving us a chance to understand what's going on with the warp, you know, uniting with other human races out there that have got advanced technologies, you know, combining and pulling all of our knowledge together to recreate our golden age of technology, and with perpetuals there too, you know, joining forces, all of us combining our efforts to recreate that human federation. That would have been an amazing alternative compared to what we got with the Emperor choosing violence, choosing bloodletting, choosing to conquer the galaxy instead of uniting it, you know, under a banner of peace and cooperation. Yeah, it would have been amazing. But then it wouldn't be Warhammer. It would be called Peace Hammer. Peace Hammer 40K. So yeah, it just wouldn't suit. It wouldn't suit, you know, what's going on in the title of this entire franchise. it has to be Warhammer. There has to always be war in, in this galaxy. There's just no way for peace at all. So yeah, really, there are a lot of possibilities that could have been available to humanity in the earlier stages of M30 or M31 or even earlier than that. There would have been far better chances for humanity to become something far greater. But now in M41, I'm afraid that the hegemony has been solidified to the point where it's impossible for any outside empire to try and crush the Imperium of Man. The Imperium of Man is just too big. It's too big. It cannot be crushed from external forces. It can only implode from internal strife and internal anarchy. That's the only way. Yeah, that's how I see it. But yeah, guys, that's it. That's it with this video. Thank you again to Luton09 for creating such an entertaining, such a thought-provoking video on Warhammer 40K, as well as thank you to Great Sage Sun for requesting that I should react to this video. It's been really good. If you guys want to check out the original video as well as Luton09's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos. And I will see you guys next time. Okay? Good night.